everyone. Welcome to the Political Insider. I'm your humble host, Brett Smith. Joining me today is a special guest and a good friend. Andrea Mew is the storytelling coordinator for Independent Women's Forum and a contributing writer at Evie magazine, always abiding by her passions for freedom, femininity, and facts. Andrea, great to have you here.
Hi, Brett. So nice to be on the show. Thanks for inviting me on.
Oh, absolutely. So the topic of toxic masculinity has invaded American culture via social media and entertainment, I would say probably over the last 4 or 5 years. And what started during the Me Too movement um, as basically calling out, I would say, just rude behavior of men towards women. Case in point, Harvey Weinstein and the predatory behavior of Hollywood's casting couch. That's now kind of all accelerated into an all-out war on, I think, what is basically uniquely and traditionally masculine traits. As a young conservative woman, what does toxic masculinity mean to you, and do you think it's a real threat to our culture?
Well, I think people are a little bit confused as to what toxic masculinity is because you can have toxic masculinity as well as toxic femininity, frankly. Um, but, it's blown out of proportions. And there are certain cases, like you mentioned with Harvey Weinstein, where there are bad men who do genuinely bad things, but that doesn't mean that we need to go on a witch hunt against every man who embodies any sort of masculine traits. I feel like women had this little opportunity that they saw, and they went, some extreme women, and they went and they took that opportunity and they are running with it. Kind of in a way that, it takes any ounce of power away from men that you can take away. It's kind of a topic I've been exploring a little bit lately in writing about gynocracy, and how, it's a little different from matriarchy. I wouldn't say we live in a matriarchal society,
Mm-hmm.
but we are definitely falling into gynocentric and gynocratic order, which is not productive for us. And when you reduce the amount of strong men in the world, you're going to start to see problems.
Yeah, it used to be about being equal. That's the
Mhm.
way when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s. I remember my mom and my aunt. My mom was, I'm a product of a single mom. These were strong women, and all they wanted was equality. And that seems to be not enough anymore, which is strange to me. The other thing is, um, I remember when some of this toxic masculinity stuff was taking shape on the internet with women getting catcalled,
Mhm.
and I used to think to myself, "What's wrong with that?" I mean, it's just like when a man is told that he's handsome. I think that anytime someone, whether regardless of the sex, is told that they look good, and I guess that can be in different formats. Somebody whistling at you or just saying you're handsome. I just think to myself, are we getting overly sensitive? And can we just take a joke and just sort of relax a little bit?
Right. And men actually, to that point, have a natural biological inclination towards objectifying women. There's this thing in it's through evolutionary psychology. There's this thing in men's brains where they happen to accidentally see women's bodies as tools. And it's not so cut and dry where a guy just looks at a woman and he's like, oh, power tool, power drill, something like that.
Sure.
But it lights up the same patterns in a man's brain. Say, if they see, oh, the curve of a woman's body, if they see her wearing high heels and they happen to find her attractive. And it might not be super comfortable to have a man compliment you when you're on the street, but he doesn't always have ill intentions. And I think with this sort of witch hunt that we've gotten after Harvey Weinstein's controversy and the rise of the Me Too movement, is that people will really just take any sort of communication from a man and view it through the lens of objectification when it
Mhm.
might just be an honest compliment. And we need to kind of learn how to take compliments again. and it's okay.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's sort of a symptom of the hypersensitivity of the culture in general, and always being sort of spring loaded to be offended. And I think that's a generational thing. I think that my generation grew up with a whole lot more offensive stuff in the sphere of entertainment and television and media. Um, I think it was more widely accepted back then, and now we've sort of been conditioned to be really hypersensitive from that standpoint. I see it, and I'm just kind of like, what are you getting so upset about?
Right.
Everyone has opinions, and it's not a big deal. You don't have to go to, DEFCON 1 just because somebody said something you don't like.
Yeah.
The one of the things I remember that my parents drilled into me was sticks and stones. Those are the things you need to fear, but words can't hurt you. Don't give people power. Don't empower what they say with a response.
Sure. And that equally applies to something like catcalling,
Mm,
where, a lot of times it's probably not actual catcalling. It's probably just a man happening to make a comment at a woman. Maybe he's trying to actually open up to a woman and get her to go on a date with him at a bar or
right.
something like that. There are so few places where a man can comfortably approach a woman nowadays
Mm,
without her just thinking that he's got ill intentions and
mhm.
that he wants to rape her, heaven forbid.
I think about that too, with the inventions of eHarmony. That changed everything. The whole online dating thing. It wasn't about gathering in common places and practicing the art of conversation.
Right?
And sharpening your skills from the standpoint of your game, and if you had any. And it's not a predatory thing. It's just like you said, this is human behavior. It's how men and women communicate.
Yeah.
And swiping left and right, you're upending like hundreds of thousands of years, right? So
Right.
I don't know how that's gonna play out in the psyches of everyone over the long term. I think we're seeing how it plays out short term, and it's not necessarily very um, appealing. So too many choices in a lot of ways.
Too many choices, and I find from not personal experience because I've never actually been on a dating app, but from observation and from speaking with other women that even though dating apps kind of serve to objectify women for their bodies, you will get more swipes if you look a particular way on them.
Mm,
It really does put the power back in the woman's hands because women tend to make more matches than men do.
sure.
Men have a lot less luck on dating apps than women do.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I have been there before, and I didn't enjoy it necessarily. Met a couple nice girls, but not anything that was long term.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of it had to do with when you're on these things and you're dating people, it doesn't mean that you're not checking this thing every day and you're getting all these matches. And it's sort of like I call it greener pastures syndrome. And there's
Okay.
always this greener pasture. There's always somebody new, and new is exciting
Mhm.
because it's part of the unknown. I've been dating this guy, but look at all these new matches I have. So
Yeah.
this is a good transition into this Andrew Tate guy. I didn't know a whole lot about this guy.
He's in police custody. He has been accused of trafficking and exploiting women, and I mean, there are countless videos,
Yeah, yeah.
lots of
So
evidence of him admitting to it.
right. For those that don't know, internet influencer Andrew Tate became the center of the internet manosphere for, I guess, his 15 minutes of fame before his online cancellation and later arrest in Romania, where authorities are still attempting to gather evidence for potential human trafficking charges, despite holding him in a cell for over 3 months. The controversy of the accusations against Tate aside, do you think that Andrew Tate is a symptom of internet defined toxic masculinity, or is he just a response to feminists and liberals who have attempted to basically emasculate men at all costs?
I think that he's a little bit of both because I don't think you would have an Andrew Tate if you didn't have such extreme toxic femininity, which, certain men see. I think there are two routes.
Mhm.
You either have men that go down the incel route where they completely remove themselves from women and they want nothing to do with women, or you have men like Tate who are, they do genuinely see women as objects.
Mhm.
And it's actually interesting. I was doing an interview recently with, if you're familiar with him, Raw Egg Nationalist.
Yeah, yeah, he's
Yeah,
funny.
he said something really interesting about Andrew Tate, which is basically, for all of Tate's talk about escaping the matrix, he's very captive to the matrix. He's not just someone who's persecuted. He's not a Neo-like figure. He's not going to be bringing down the system. Um, he's just a caricature.
Yeah.
And no, we shouldn't give people like him too much more of a platform,
Mhm.
but it is important to talk about people like Tate because there is a segment of men who really see that sort of thing and they resonate with his message.
Yeah. I think there's a correlation there between guys like that and even Jordan Peterson,
Mm.
who I like in a lot of ways. I've seen him speak. I disagree with him on certain things, obviously, like his strange suits and shoe wear. But
The two-tone suit.
yeah, yeah, it's just I'd rather, I'm just not feeling it. I don't get it. But
Oh, I find it fascinating.
it definitely is that. It definitely is that. He's very eccentric. But I think there's a correlation there between these two kind of characters. And I just think to myself, is there that many absent dads and strong masculine role models out there for young boys and young men? I certainly had my dad, who was one, and my grandfather, both veterans. My dad, Vietnam, my grandfather, World War II, Battle of the Bulge.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of their heroes became my heroes just through sort of osmosis, whether it's Audie Murphy or Carol Shelby or Chuck Yeager. These are guys they would talk about, obviously. But I just
Yeah.
think to myself, where are those men in today's society? And why aren't they helping young men today find those types of archetypes and heroes and people to look up to? It's strange.
Well, there's also just a lack of spaces for men to be men in, or
Mhm.
for boys to be boys in. For instance, Boy Scouts becoming integrated with females.
Mhm.
You can't have your young boys who just are surrounded by other young boys learning scouting and looking up to their scoutmaster.
Mhm.
You don't have the same sort of fraternal organizations that you used to have. Some of them have fallen by the wayside, and whether you believe that they were secretive societies or not, destructive societies, I what's most important is that they were a space for men to be creative with one another,
Mhm.
to express themselves, and to not feel like they had to censor themselves or act differently to try to impress women. Having a space for men is so vital. And, you see how women are, even to this day, legally given spaces where they can just be women. I think it was in the whole gym discussion where
Mhm.
women only gyms can be a thing. But
Mhm.
why, like, that has legal protection to it. Why is it that men can't have male only gyms? Honestly, it's a genuine question.
So our research team at the Political Insider has explored the trad wife and sigma male trends and threads on TikTok, Reddit, and Instagram, where we were all pretty genuinely surprised how many people were advocating for things like how to be a good housewife and other culturally traditionalist norms, or at least post World War II. And post World War II, all this stuff was just basic common sense to my grandparents, but now they seem quite revolutionary. The idea of rejecting modernity and returning to a tradition like my grandparents had in the 50s is very avant-garde. Why does it seem that millennials and Zoomers are obsessing over a way of life almost alien to today's modern world?
Well, yeah, what the world that, your grandparents built, the world that my grandparents built was one that saw widespread success.
Hmm.
And while we're looking to models to figure out how we're going to create our own world, we're realizing that, the way that we're positioning women and the way that we're positioning men is not sustainable in the long run, because you have this whole girl boss mentality where from a young age, I know I was told from a young age by peers and teachers to really put a priority on my education. And I was never really instructed on the beauties of marriage, of motherhood down the line. I was never encouraged to do any of that sort of thing. I was encouraged to just go straight through the college pipeline, work as hard as I can. And I'm grateful that I did go to college, but I'm often wondering, could I be doing exactly what I'm doing today without a college education? And the answer is probably yes. That's my particular line of work. I know that's not the same for everyone, but I do find the whole trad wife thing to be quite interesting, because you do have a segment of women who really only like it for the aesthetics. And
Hmm.
I think if they actually returned to any sort of feasible tradition, they might feel a little bit boxed in by it.
Hmm.
Because when you really go to traditional societies, you end up having things where, there's still widespread female genital mutilation in the world. There are still places like Yemen where women have to have male supervisors to, their husbands, to be able to go out in public.
Hmm.
So, yes, learning how to bake bread, amazing. Learning how to make a house a home, amazing. Learning how to be a good, helpful wife, great stuff. But we don't need to make it into a caricature that, left and right can't take seriously.
Hmm. Yeah, this whole trad wife thing. I think that when I look at it, like you, I see more of a focus on aesthetics.
Right.
But I do think if it leads to more homemaking and baking and things that make men really happy when they come home, which is a nice clean house and some banana bread or some kind of cake waiting. I don't think there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. And baking's hard.
Right.
People don't understand this. It's a very, very specific science. If you leave anything out, you're going to screw it up. So. Um, but
Yeah.
I'd like to think that maybe it grows from being not just about mid-century modern furniture and and curlers in your hairs, and checkerboards and such, and kidney-shaped vases, to something a little bit more tangible, from the standpoint of, I think, bringing men and women back together under more maybe traditional means.
Right, and it doesn't mean that a woman has to give up her work, because
No.
there are so many things throughout history that women have been able to accomplish, whether they were stuck in the household or whether they could go out and, sell products that
Mhm.
they happen to make in their household. And there's a very large percentage of female-owned businesses, small businesses,
Oh
that
yeah.
they thrive in household environments.
I think the Etsy economy is just incredible.
Right,
Absolutely
right.
incredible. So,
People make such incredible crafted goods,
yeah.
and it's, again, another very feminine outlet.
Yeah, and it's creative. I think that's also really good. I like seeing people be creative and do things that make them happy, you know? Okay, here's an expansive question. What does gender equality mean to you?
People talk about equality, and they often mean equity, or
Mm,
they talk about equity and they think they're talking about equality.
mm,
Um, you have with diversity and inclusion sort of directors out there thinking that equity is the vehicle to which we will achieve equality. But in my opinion, I really don't think we need to metaphorically rob Peter to pay Paul, if you know what I mean. So you have people that are saying, and I agree with them, that everyone deserves to have the same opportunities. Yes, we all need the same opportunities open to us. We all need the same resources open to us. Good that we can all vote. Good that we can all get a loan from the bank. But that doesn't mean that we need opportunity doesn't mean that we need the exact same outcomes.
Hmm.
And that's where I think the whole equity portion of this gets very confusing because you're supposed to meet quotas. You're supposed to force filmmakers to have a certain percentage of minorities in their films, no matter if that's a gender minority or a racial minority, if they want to be considered for an award. And at some point, you have to wonder, well, how soon until the side that you don't like, aka white men and white women, how soon until they are the ones that are technically the minority? And then what if you're not putting the right percentage of them in it? Wasn't the whole controversy around the Black Panther movie that it was almost an entirely Black cast? So
Mhm.
how does that actually match the Oscars new standards for a diversity quota if it's all
Right.
just Black actors? Where are the
Right.
Asians? Where are the Mexicans? Where are the white people?
Mhm.
I thought intersectionality was just a trend because I grew up on the internet and I was in circles, say on things like Tumblr, where that's where a lot of the gender ideology really sort of got ingrained in culture. And you start to see things like intersectional feminism and just intersectionality in general move from academia into the real world through things like Tumblr back in the
Mhm.
day. Um, and it's really sad. It's people just putting themselves into tinier and tinier boxes where you all need your own unique identity to feel good about yourself. But why can't you just feel good about yourself from your work product? Why can't you just feel good about yourself through the values that you live day to day?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not enough anymore for someone to just be a good citizen. They have to be a good citizen that has this identity in their bio.
Right.
It's not
Right.
enough anymore.
Yeah, it's weird. It's all this external validation, which is reaching out to the collective. I
Mhm.
need all of these people to accept me and like me. Otherwise, I'm not worth anything. It's all about the individual. You make your own life special.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't want someone to pick me for something because of my gender.
yeah.
And similarly, I wouldn't want someone to pick me for something based on the fact that I am white. I wouldn't want that. I want someone to judge me based on who I am as a person, which is completely separate from the characteristics that I cannot choose about myself, the things
Right.
that I was just born into.
For our viewers that don't know, tell us about what Independent Women's Forum is, as well as Evie Magazine and what you have going on over there.
Yeah, so I'm at the Independent Women's Forum. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are a policy center nationwide. Well, actually, we have multiple policy centers within the organization,
Mhm.
but we are developing and advancing policies that are freedom focused. They lean more conservative in nature, clearly, based on the way that I speak. But it's all about humanizing the issues for people, for real life Americans. That's what I specialize in.
Mhm.
I'm in the storytelling world in IWF, where, say that there is a price transparency bill and that's going through state legislature or maybe even legislature nationwide. Um, Finding people who have had experiences where they've been gouged for their medical bills, finding people who, or for, for females and for female sports, that's another big one. We work
Mhm.
with Riley Gaines.
Oh, great.
She's a spokeswoman at IWF. So stories like hers, where the whole issue of transgender or trans identified biological men in female sports, humanizing that issue for people and really you know, getting people to understand the issues.
Mhm.
So that's IWF. And it actually ties very nicely into my work that I do with Evie magazine, which is just a very freedom and female focused publication. It's all about truth instead of indoctrination for women. And we're not, we're not trying to push any sort of agenda, but we are telling the stories that other publications won't tell.
Mhm.
We're talking about the countless lies about emotional fulfillment, health issues, about anything from birth control, all that jazz.
Mhm.
Um, we're not really, fighting a culture war per se, but we're providing women who may not they may read things like Cosmopolitan and they may groan.
Right.
They may read things like Vogue and they may just think, this isn't for me. This is, we're giving women a different outlet that's a little bit more traditional, but still very trendy.
One of the things I wanted to tell our viewers is Evie magazine is a beautiful magazine. I mean, the production quality, the pages, everything, the color, everything is top notch, and it reminds me of maybe some of the women's magazines we would have seen when I was a kid, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. When you say
Yeah.
more traditional, um,
Yeah.
because it
And
seems like Cosmopolitan, Mademoiselle, all of these things are now very woke, very left of center. I would argue that uh, they're preaching cultural Marxism in a lot of ways, and fighting a culture war. I think they subvert our culture, American culture, Western traditions, Western culture in a lot of ways. And I
and
think it's important that there's an alternative out there that is authentic. And that's the
yeah,
one thing when I look at the magazine, it's not cheap. I mean, you guys spent some money on this thing, and it shows. And I think I think that is so important, because when we're looking for alternatives from the standpoint of culture, whether it's entertainment or anything, the authenticity is everything. And if it's not there, it's not going to work. It's not going to
yeah,
compete. And so when I look at what you guys are doing, I'm like, wow, they're really competing. They're
yeah.
playing to win, and I think that's exciting.
Thank you, Brett. And I mean, it's major kudos to Brittany and Gabriel, who were the creative directors on the print magazine, and obviously the founders of Evie in general. They create beautiful work, like you were
Mhm.
mentioning, with the actual quality of itself. Um, Receiving my first print magazine from Evie in the mail meant so much to me
Yeah.
because um, I mean, I had received the one before, but my work was not in it. Receiving the most recent one really meant a lot to me because I was hearkening back to times where as a child, I would collect, or young adolescent, I
Mhm.
would collect magazines and I would rip out the pages that I liked and I would stick them up on my wall.
Right.
And so I had an entire wall in my room of Teen Vogue and 17,
Yeah.
just little cutouts from those magazines peppered everywhere along my walls. And so when I started to hold the new magazine in my hands, I was just thinking to myself, how cool is it that I'm actually part of something like this that I used to look up to as a young woman? And it means a lot to me.
Andrew Breitbart said politics is downstream from culture. Why is it important for conservatives, or anyone really center right for that matter, to focus on cultural issues as opposed to just always staying in the same lane of policy and politics? What do we gain by talking about things other than politics?
I think we gain a lot because so many of those institutions, the entertainment industry, is all just led by and it's dominated by leftists. And because of that, they can really control the narrative. And
Mhm.
again, like I was saying with Evie, is that we're not, you know, we're not fighting the culture war. Um, we're not, it's not us on top of a defensive battlement, you know, hurling
Right.
abuse on the mass media or anything, but we're trying to involve ourselves in creating pop culture
Mhm.
in an organic way, not in a way that feels inauthentic, where you look at a piece of media and you go, oh, yeah, that's conservative,
Mhm.
or oh, that's liberal. I get that way sometimes, you know, with Christian movies, for
Mhm.
example, where you can really tell
Yeah.
that it's Christian in nature. And that's okay. There's a place for that.
Sure.
But will it get the message across to the mainstream?
Right.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, you sometimes run into just preaching strictly to the converted, and that's a problem for our side. And I think that there's got to be things out there culturally that are center right, not overtly political necessarily, but center right culturally for people who are not center right or center left. They're undecided.
Yeah.
You know, there's more people out there that have not been influenced by the left or the right.
There are
And
so
though
many people who just don't care. It's crazy.
exactly. And just because they don't care doesn't mean you can't influence them or have an impact on them. So they now do care about something that our side finds important.
Maybe 10 years ago it didn't seem as bad. Maybe 20 years ago it didn't seem as bad. But I mean, you listen to any mainstream music nowadays, for example, and I'm just always kind of shocked by how overt they are in messaging. And by they, I just mean anyone who's writing this music. Like perhaps when Ariana Grande is singing about wanting to have sex all night long in her 34 35 song or whatever it's called, which young girls listen to and is played on the radio. Perhaps she's not the one who's actually choosing that messaging. Perhaps it's someone else
Right.
in the entertainment industry. But you have to wonder, I mean, why are those the winning messages that are coming out? Why can't we just have good love songs anymore?
Sadly, we are out of time. Andrea, go ahead and give everyone your social media coordinates so everyone knows where to find you and your work.
Yeah, I'm pretty simple across all platforms. Andrea J. Mew, AndreaJMew is how it's spelled. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram. You can find my writing in Evie magazine and on IWF.org and IWV.org.
Cool. We'll link to all that stuff as well. Thank you so much. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you, Brett. I'm
Yeah.
really glad you had me on. Thank
Yeah.
you.
We'll do it again.